Hi, I'm Graham, and welcome to this demo on auditing for Azure SQL Database. So auditing is currently a preview feature, so in order to use this I've had to come into the settings for my account, into the preview features section, and I've signed up for auditing for Azure SQL Database. I've also had to sign up for the new service tiers for SQL Database because auditing is only supported on basic, standard and premium tiers, which are currently in preview, and not on the original web and business tiers. So having done all of that, I've signed up and I'm ready to start using it. So here I am in the new Microsoft Azure portal, which again is currently in preview, and I've got a couple of services already configured here. You can see I've got a SQL database called Audited DB, and I've got a storage account called Graham Store. So let's start with the storage account. Actually, let's take a look at that. And it's just an empty storage account at the moment. You can see there's no tables, queues or containers in here, so it's really just there ready for me to start using. I've added it to a resource group called Audit Demo. Resource groups are a great way of combining multiple resources that are related to one another, so I've put it into this Audit Demo resource group, which also includes the database. So I can go from here and take a look at that database. And we can see the Audited DB is configured here. It's sitting on a server called Graham SQL, and if I go and have a look at that server, a blade opens up for that server and I can see the settings for that server. So we've navigated around. You've seen what we've got in here. Very simple setup, just a storage account, a Azure SQL database on an Azure SQL database server. So if we have a look at the settings, I've got settings for the server itself, and you can see there are auditing settings currently in preview at the server level. So I can come in here and I could configure auditing at the server and then inherit those settings for every database on the server. Or alternatively, what I can do is I can go and configure auditing at the individual database level. So if I go back to the blade for my Audit DB database here, and I just scroll down a little bit here, you can see there's a section here on the blade for auditing, and currently nothing is set up, so it says enable and set up auditing. Well, let's go ahead and do that. So we'll click on that, and up comes the auditing preview blade. And what I need to do in order to set up auditing is very simple. I'm just going to configure it to use the storage account that I've created earlier on. So we'll just go and hook up the auditing to that storage account. There it is there. So we got that selected. And you'll notice there's this thing here about security enabled connection strings, and that's going to be important in a minute, so let's just take a look at that just now. There are some connection strings here that you would use from your applications to connect to the Azure SQL database. Now originally when I first created the database, I'd be using these things here. So it's server name .database.windows.net on port 1433. If I want to audit events, then I actually have to change that connection string in my client applications, and it's server name .database.secure.windows.net. So just simply adding that additional secure parameter into the server name will enable, if auditing is enabled in the database, will cause events to be audited. So that's why it's important to know about that. You can copy those connection strings to the clipboard from here and update your application config files with that. So we're ready to go. We'll just go ahead and click OK to enable auditing. And the panel starts to update to tell me that it's configuring auditing, and eventually it's going to tell me that it's set up but nothing's being audited yet. So let's just wait for that. Yeah, no audit events in the last 24 hours. And if I want to go in and have a look into that, I can click on that panel, and up comes another blade with more details about the different things that will be audited. Of course, currently nothing's been audited. And from here I can go ahead and I can change the configuration for the auditing. So I can choose what to audit and what not to audit, or I could inherit the audit settings from the server. So I'm going to leave it with the default. I'm auditing everything that could happen, so data access, changes to data, schema changes, security violations, and so on, all the different things that I could audit. That's all set up and ready to go. And what I'll find if I go back to my storage account now that I've configured auditing for the database, so we'll just go back to here, and what I want to do is I want to close that database down. Take a look in here. It says table 0 is because the blade hasn't refreshed, but if I go into there and have a look, there is actually now a table in there. The table's called audit logs, and that's been created in order to have somewhere to store the details of the audited events. So it all seems to be hooked up quite happily. If I go and have a look in my audited events table, I'm just going to use Server Explorer in Visual Studio to have a look at my Azure storage. You could use any Azure storage client, but if I go and have a look at the tables in there, we'll just refresh that. There's the audit logs table, and if I view the contents of that table, there's currently nothing in it. There's no audited events so far. So let's go ahead and do some stuff so that we see some auditing happening. And to do that, I'm going to use SQL Server Management Studio. Obviously, in reality, you would use a client application, and you would configure it to connect using that secure connection string that we saw earlier on. So I'm just going to go ahead and add in that secure parameter there. So it's the server name .database.secure.windows.net and the password to connect to that. And SQL Server Management Studio goes and connects to my Azure SQL Database. So if I have a look, I can see there's the Audited DB database, and it contains a table called My Table, very original. And what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and we will create a new query in here, just so that we can start performing some actions that access that data. So first of all, we'll just do a select star from my table, and yep, it has one row in it with the value 1 a value, and then we'll perhaps just insert some data into there as well. So insert into my table values another value. So that's added a row into that that table there. So we've connected using that secure connection string, and we've performed a couple of actions on the data in the database. Let's go and see what effect that's had. So if we go back to our portal here and have a look at the database, and in the auditing preview panel here, what we'll probably see here actually is that nothing's been audited yet, because it takes a little while to propagate through. So after a while this will update to show that several events have happened, and then I can drill into here and I could actually see details of those different events that have happened. We haven't given it time for that to propagate through yet, but we can shortcut things by just simply taking a look at the underlying audit table. So if I go back to my audit logs table here and go ahead and view that now, sure enough, a bunch of events have been audited. So there's a whole bunch of keys here that are just really to do with logging the time and the server name, the database name, and so on. They'll all be pretty much the same. But if I scroll along a little bit, I can actually see the event types. So data changes, login success, data access, and so on. And I can see a bunch of things. There are some things that actually SQL Server Management Studio did in order to get information to populate the UI. But then the queries that I actually performed, you can see there's an insert into my table values, another value up here where I've gone ahead and inserted that data into the table. So you can see that all of those events have been audited. They're now stored in that underlying Azure storage table, and eventually those will propagate through, and in fact you can see some of those events are starting to propagate through. So I can see the login success appearing now in the auditing blade in the portal. So hopefully that's been a fairly useful introduction to auditing for Azure SQL Database. Very simple to set up, just needs you to create a storage account. That storage account has to be in the same geographical region as the database, and then you can use that to store your audited events. You hook that up to your auditing either at the server level or at the individual database level, and then just make sure you use those secure connection strings when you connect to the database and all of those events that you've selected will be audited. Hope you found that useful. Thanks for your time.